Today's video brings an incredible event. The Roman Colosseum was in complete silence. The vast crowd filling the stands made no sound, but their anticipation was palpable. Men, women, and children from various parts of the empire had gathered to witness a cruelly awaited spectacle. Yet, what they didn't know was that what would happen there would transcend the boundaries of human understanding, defy the laws of nature, and, most importantly, reveal a manifestation of divine power no one could have anticipated. In the center of the arena, John, the beloved apostle of Jesus, was dragged toward the cruel execution that the Roman Empire had condemned him to. He was about to be cast into a cauldron of boiling oil, a death meant to serve as an example for all who dared challenge Rome's authority and its enforcement of imperial worship. The pungent smell of boiling oil spread through the air as guards pushed him toward his fate. The crowd, which until that moment had been full of expectation, now awaited the screams of agony that would echo through the arena. John's death was meant to be another demonstration of the empire's power over those who opposed it. But something extraordinary was about to happen, something no one could foresee. It was a scene that would leave everyone present astounded, a moment where faith would become visible to all who witnessed it. To understand how John survived that experience and became a symbol of unshakable faith, we must look back to the early moments of his journey. Imagine being present at that miraculous moment in the Colosseum, witnessing John's unwavering faith in the face of the cauldron of boiling oil. What would you feel seeing God's power manifested so clearly? If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear from you. What would it be like for you to witness such a miracle? Join the conversation. Now, let's continue. John was born in the region of Galilee into a family of fishermen. He was the son of Zebedee, a respected man in the fishing profession, and the brother of James. Both followed their father's tradition, dedicating themselves to fishing in the waters of the Sea of Galilee. But there was something special about John. His fervent heart longed for more than a life of fishing. From a young age, he sought a deep connection with God, something beyond the daily routine. His mother, Salome, a devout follower of God, also influenced John's life. Like many Jews, she awaited the arrival of the promised Messiah. Salome's faith was evident in her daily life and surely impacted John. Early on, he distanced himself from simple earthly concerns and was guided by a desire to learn more about God's promises. It was in this context that John began following John the Baptist, the forerunner of the Messiah. John the Baptist preached on the banks of the Jordan River, calling people to repentance and preparation for the coming of the Messiah. And it was there, in that setting, that John first heard of Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus' message of forgiveness and redemption resonated deeply in John's heart. It didn't take long before he and his brother James left their fishing nets to follow Jesus' call. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Matthew 4 verse 19. This marked the beginning of his journey with the Master. John, with his passionate and fervent temperament, devoted himself wholeheartedly to the mission Jesus proposed. He was a young man who not only followed in the Master's footsteps but also gave himself entirely to what Jesus taught and represented. From the outset of his discipleship, John demonstrated deep devotion. He was one of the first to respond to Jesus' call, leaving his previous life behind without hesitation. His love for Jesus was immense, shaping not only his own life but also deeply influencing Christ's mission. Jesus, in turn, noticed this intense devotion in John. The nickname Jesus gave him and his brother James, sons of thunder, Mark 3 verse 17, reflected precisely this ardent passion. John was a man of intense emotions and vibrant faith, often expressed in impulsive words and actions. This temperament, which at first glance might seem a weakness, would eventually become one of John's greatest strengths, a force that sustained him even in moments of extreme adversity. John's transformation was gradual. Daily companionship with Jesus, constantly witnessing his miracles, and absorbing his life lessons shaped John's worldview. He not only witnessed the resurrection of Jairus' daughter, the healing of the woman with a blood issue, and Christ's transfiguration, but also absorbed the profound meaning behind each of these events. The Transfiguration, for instance, was a pivotal moment in John's life. He and two other disciples, Peter and James, had the privilege of seeing Jesus' glory revealed in an indescribable way. In a moment of awe, John witnessed Jesus' divine revelation, shining with heavenly light. It was then that John began to grasp the magnitude of who Jesus was and the depth of God's love. Another crucial moment for John occurred during the Last Supper, when he leaned on Jesus' chest, not just demonstrating physical closeness but also a profound spiritual connection. It was an expression of total trust, as if John knew it would be one of his last moments with Jesus before his crucifixion. Leaning back against Jesus, he asked him, "Lord, who is it?" John 13 verse 25. This moment revealed the mutual friendship and trust between John and Jesus. At the crucifixion, while the other disciples had fled, John remained steadfast at the foot of the cross. He was the only one who stayed with Jesus until the end, witnessing his suffering and death. When Jesus, in his final breath, entrusted the care of his mother Mary to John, he received an immense honor. "Behold your mother," John 19 verse 27. This act of trust and love from Jesus showed John the true meaning of serving God and others with total commitment. This unconditional love that John demonstrated for Jesus was more than mere devotion. It was a relationship of deep and mature faith, a faith that transcended life's difficulties and would become the foundation for his mission after Christ's ascension. Over the years, John continued his journey of faith, boldly preaching Christ's gospel, spreading the message of resurrection, and proclaiming God's unconditional love. He became a significant leader in early Christianity, founding churches and strengthening believers. Even as persecutions increased, his faith remained unshaken. He was ready to face any adversity, knowing his purpose was firmly rooted in God's will. This unwavering trust in God was put to the test when John was arrested and taken to Rome for trial. He was accused of heresy for preaching the gospel and challenging imperial worship. His death sentence was unrelenting. He would be cast into a cauldron of boiling oil. However, John's faith sustained him, and he was prepared to face any fate, knowing eternal life with Christ awaited him regardless of what happened to his body. It was within this context that the Roman Empire planned his execution, unaware it would become one of the greatest testimonies in Christian history. What seemed to be the end of John's earthly life would, in fact, mark a victory for Christian faith. The tension in the Colosseum was at its peak. The crowd, men, women, and children, sat in restless silence. All were eagerly, even impatiently, awaiting the spectacle. John, the apostle of Jesus, was being led to the arena's center. The cauldron of boiling oil, prepared for his execution, bubbled with the promise of a cruel and disfiguring death. The acidic and hot smell of the boiling oil permeated the air, making everyone present acutely aware of the suffering about to unfold. However, as John was being pushed toward his destiny, something surprising happened. A profound silence fell over the arena. Not the silence of curiosity one might expect from an intrigued crowd, but the silence of disbelief, of awe in the face of an impossible miracle. John was about to be thrown into the cauldron, but his trust in God, which had accompanied him throughout his life, sustained him with an indescribable peace. When placed before the boiling oil, instead of being consumed by the flames, John stood firm, unharmed. The cauldron, which was meant to bring his death, did not touch him. The miracle was visible to everyone present, an unmistakable sign of God's power. As the crowd watched, a murmur of disbelief spread, followed by a cry of reverence and praise. "It is divine intervention," some exclaimed, while others knelt, unable to contain their emotions at the miracle they were witnessing. The sunlight seemed to reflect supernaturally on John, as if heaven itself was declaring that he was being protected by a higher power. Some present, especially those familiar with the scriptures, recalled the words of the prophet Daniel regarding the 3 Hebrew men who were thrown into the fiery furnace and were miraculously spared from the flames. "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed." Daniel 3 verse 25. The immediate reference to the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was no coincidence. Once again, God had demonstrated his supernatural power over the forces of nature. John's salvation was a testimony not only to those in the arena but to the entire world that God holds absolute control over all things, including life and death. Emperor Domitian, who was in Rome and had already ordered John's execution, was terrified when he heard what had happened in the Colosseum. He realized that such a visible miracle could transform John into an even more powerful symbol for Christians, making it even harder to eradicate the Christian faith from the empire. Fear consumed Domitian, who then decided to change his strategy. Instead of continuing to persecute John, he exiled him to the island of Patmos, a desolate place where he believed the apostle could no longer have any impact. However, Domitian underestimated the power of divine purpose. No place in the world could separate John from God's plan. John's exile on Patmos did not mark the end of his mission. On the contrary, it was the beginning of one of the most powerful revelations the church would ever receive. It was there, in the solitude of the island, that John received the vision that became the book of Revelation, unveiling mysteries of the future and delivering words of hope and guidance to the church for all time. The revelation given to John was a message not only for the church of that time, but for all generations of believers who would come after. There, John had a glorious vision of the risen Christ, who revealed himself to him in a magnificent way. The description of Christ as the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end of all things, reaffirms Jesus' authority and dominion over all creation. This prophetic book also brought a warning and a promise. While isolated on the island of Patmos, John wrote about the difficult times to come but also proclaimed God's ultimate victory over evil. Revelation is a message of resilience, perseverance in faith, and trust that, in the end, God will triumph over all forces of darkness. For Christians of all ages, this book has been a source of encouragement, especially in times of persecution and adversity. John's life is a testimony that no matter the adversity or exile, God's mission for each of us cannot be interrupted. When we have unwavering faith, God not only sustains us but also transforms even the most desolate moments into opportunities to fulfill His purpose. John went from being a simple fisherman to one of the most influential apostles in Christian history, and his testimony continues to resonate to this day. But what can we learn from John's life and the miracle that occurred in the Colosseum? John's story challenges us to reflect on our own faith. All of us, at some point, face difficulties that seem insurmountable. We may have our own arenas of persecution, suffering, and challenges, and no matter how intense they may be, we must remember that God is with us in every situation. In John's life, we find an example of true faith, a faith that is not shaken by external circumstances but remains steadfast in the face of difficulties. His life teaches us that even when it seems like we are being defeated, God has the power to transform our circumstances and use us as witnesses of His greatness. Today, in a modern world full of uncertainties, persecutions, and adversities, John's story remains a source of inspiration. Like him, we are called to be faithful, to stand firm no matter what we face. When challenged, we must remember that God is greater than any problem or adversity. He is with us in all situations, and He can turn even the worst moments into opportunities for His glory. John's faith teaches us that God does not abandon us, even in the most difficult moments. The Apostle John was not spared from suffering but was sustained through it. This is something crucial for us to understand. Faith does not remove all difficulties, but it gives us the strength to persevere through them, trusting that God is in control of everything. In Romans 8 verse 28, we read, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." This promise assures us that even in the most painful and confusing circumstances, God is working for our good. He can use our trials to strengthen our faith and prepare us for what He has planned for us. John's life, his faithfulness, and his endurance are a powerful example for us all. He shows us that despite difficulties and even threats of death, faith in God is unshakable. John's story is a reminder that when we face our own struggles, we can trust that God is with us. He will never abandon us, and even in the midst of suffering, He will turn our lives into testimonies of His glory. As we reflect on John's life, we are invited to evaluate our own journey of faith. Are we fully trusting God, even in the face of adversity? Can we maintain unshakable faith, as John did, even when circumstances seem unbearable? Therefore, today, I invite you to reflect on this powerful story. If you are facing difficulties, challenges, or situations that seem insurmountable, remember that God is with you. He can turn your pain into an opportunity for testimony, and His grace is sufficient to sustain your faith. Now, I would like to invite you to let John's life and his example of faith inspire a change in your heart. Believe, even in the most difficult situations, that God is with you. Pray, trust, and let Him work in your life just as He worked in John's. He is the same God yesterday, today, and forever, and He will continue to work in your life for His glory. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to take a step of faith. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with those who need this message of hope. Leave a comment below and share how this story has impacted your life. Together, we can spread the message of faith and hope that transcends any circumstance. May God bless your life, strengthen your faith, and be with you every step of your journey.